A Jackson man has been convicted of shooting and killing his ex-girlfriend during a home invasion 3 years ago. 33-year-old Zevrion Brent was found guilty today of second-degree murder in the death of Terrencia Jackson. He was also convicted of aggravated assault for shooting her boyfriend at the time, Henry Perry. In June 2022, Jackson police say Brent forced himself into a home on Fleetwood Drive and attacked the couple. Brent is scheduled to be sentenced later this month. He faces up to 60 years in prison.
Home is supposed to be the safest place, a refuge from the chaos outside. But in June 7, 2022, that sense of safety was shattered. What should have been a quiet night turned into a scene of horror. 26 years old, Terrencia lay in bed with her BF, unaware that danger was already at the door. His footsteps change. Faster now, more certain. The closer he gets, the more his breathing shifts, like something inside him already knows. In a sudden, violently, her ex forced his way inside and opened fire, turning their home into a center of a devastating tragedy. Before we go further, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to True Crime Stories Chronicles. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments, I read them all. And if you're into real, detailed true crime stories like this, click the like button. Terrencia Jackson was simply a young woman trying to build a life that felt stable. At 26, she was at that stage many people know well, the point where you're no longer figuring out who you are, but trying to hold things together. Work, relationships, responsibilities, and the quiet pressure to get it right this time. She lived in Jackson, Mississippi, in a modest home along Fleetwood Drive. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't meant to impress anyone. But it was hers, a space where she could rest, think, and feel some level of control over her life. And for Terrencia, that mattered. People who knew her described her as someone who kept her circle small. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She had a calm presence, someone who could sit in a room and listen more than she spoke. But when she did open up, there was warmth there, the kind that made people feel comfortable around her. Like many young women her age, Terrencia had gone through her share of ups and downs, especially when it came to relationships. Love, for her, hadn't been simple. There had been moments of hope and moments that forced her to step back and rethink things. By the time this story begins to take shape, she was trying to move forward. That meant letting go of what no longer worked. It meant creating distance from a past that had become too heavy to carry. And most importantly, it meant choosing herself. She had been in a relationship with a man named Zevrion Brent. What started like many relationships, connection, time spent together, shared moments, eventually turned into something that no longer felt right for her. The reasons weren't dramatic on the surface. It wasn't one single event. It was a buildup, the kind that slowly makes you realize that staying is no longer an option. So she made a decision. She walked away. And anyone who has ever left a relationship knows, it's rarely as clean as it sounds. Ending something doesn't always mean it's over for both people. For Terrencia, though, she was done. She wanted something different, something that felt safer, something that allowed her to breathe again, without tension lingering in the background. And so, she began to move on. She started seeing someone new. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't about replacing one person with another. It was about starting fresh, giving herself a chance at something that didn't carry the weight of the past. A relationship that felt lighter, more stable, more aligned with the version of herself she was trying to become. Her days began to settle into a rhythm: work, home, conversations with people she trusted. Small routines that don't seem important until you realize they are the very things that make life feel normal, even peaceful. There were no signs, at least on the surface, that anything was about to go wrong. No warning that her past hadn't fully let go of her. Because while Terrencia was moving forward, someone else was standing still. And sometimes, when one person moves on and the other doesn't, it creates a kind of tension that doesn't just disappear. It waits. Terrencia Jackson and Zevrion Brent didn't start as a story anyone would look at and expect to end in tragedy. Like many relationships, theirs began in a way that felt ordinary. Two people spending time together, building familiarity, learning each other's routines, and gradually becoming part of each other's daily lives. In the early stages, there was nothing that stood out as alarming. They talked, They saw each other regularly, and from the outside it looked like a typical young couple trying to make things work. The kind of relationship people assume will either grow into something serious or quietly fade with time. But relationships don't always break because of one big moment. Sometimes it's the small things, the disagreements that don't fully resolve, the tension that lingers longer than it should, the feeling that something just isn't sitting right anymore. For Terrencia, that feeling began to settle in over time. It wasn't immediate, it didn't happen overnight. But slowly, she started to see that what she wanted and what she was experiencing didn't align anymore. The relationship began to feel less like a partnership and more like something she needed to step away from. And eventually, she did. She made the decision to end things. From her perspective, it was a step toward peace, toward clarity, toward a life that felt less complicated. It was her way of closing a chapter that no longer made sense for her. But what felt like closure for her didn't feel the same for him. That's where the shift began. Because while Terrencia was focused on moving forward, Zverian Brent appeared to be holding on, whether emotionally, mentally, or both. And that difference created an imbalance that would only grow over time. At first, it may not have looked serious. Staying in contact, wanting to talk, not fully accepting the distance she was trying to create. These are things many people experience after a breakup. And in some cases, they fade naturally, but in others, they don't. And while Terrencia was continuing her life, building something new, finding moments of normalcy, there was still a thread from her past that hadn't been cut. What makes situations like this so difficult to recognize in real time is that they don't always come with clear warnings. There isn't always a moment where everything suddenly feels dangerous. Instead, it builds quietly. By the time Zverian Brent decided to propose, things between him and Terrencia Jackson were no longer what they used to be. From his point of view, the relationship still meant something worth holding on to. Proposing wasn't just a romantic gesture, it was a way to secure something he felt was slipping away. A way to bring things back under control. To reset what had already begun to fall apart. But for Terrencia, the relationship had already ended in her mind. That difference between what he believed and what she had already accepted set the stage for a moment that would change everything. The proposal didn't happen in the middle of a perfect relationship. It came after distance had already formed, after she had emotionally stepped away, after she had started seeing a future that no longer included him. So when the moment came, it didn't land the way he expected. There was no excitement, no relief, no sense of yes, this is what I've been waiting for. Instead, there was hesitation. And then, rejection. Not loud, not dramatic, but firm enough to make it clear she was not going back. For Terrencia, this was a decision she had already made long before that moment. The proposal didn't change anything for her. If anything, it confirmed what she already knew, that staying would only take her backward. But for Brent, that moment carried a completely different weight. Because rejection, especially in a situation like that, isn't just about hearing no. It's about what that no represents. Loss, embarrassment, a sense of being replaced, and in some cases, a blow to pride that doesn't sit quietly. There's a shift that happens in moments like this. It's not always visible on the surface. Sometimes there's no immediate reaction that seems out of control. No scene. No argument that signals what's really going on inside. But internally, something changes. What may have started as hope can quickly turn into frustration. Frustration can turn into resentment. And resentment, if left unchecked, can take a much darker direction. After the proposal was rejected, things didn't return to normal. For Terrencia, the decision had already been made. She kept moving forward, keeping distance, focusing on her own life, and continuing the new relationship she had started. To her, the chapter with Zverian Brent was closed. But on his end, it didn't look that way. There was a noticeable shift in how he carried himself around the situation. The rejection didn't settle into acceptance. Instead, it lingered. And when something lingers like that, it often shows up in small ways before it ever becomes obvious. Contact didn't fully stop. There were attempts to reach her. Conversations that didn't feel necessary anymore. A sense that he was still trying to stay connected to a life she had already stepped away from. At first glance, It might have looked like someone struggling to let go. But beneath that, there was tension building. And tension, when it's not resolved, doesn't just disappear, it grows. Terrencia, on the other hand, stayed consistent in her direction. She wasn't going back. Her focus was on creating something new, something that didn't carry the weight of what she had left behind. The relationship she had entered after Brent was different. It represented a fresh start, a different kind of connection, a different environment. And for the first time in a while, there was a sense of normalcy returning to her life. But that contrast, her moving forward while he remained emotionally tied to the past, created an imbalance that became harder to ignore. There are moments in situations like this where behavior begins to raise questions. Why is he still around? Why does it feel like he hasn't accepted this? Why does his presence still linger even after everything has ended? These questions don't always come with immediate answers. And in real time, they don't always feel like danger. Sometimes they just feel uncomfortable. But discomfort can be a signal. As time went on, it became clearer that Brent wasn't stepping away in the way Terrencia had hoped. The emotional distance she created didn't seem to exist on his side. And when one person refuses to detach, it creates a situation where boundaries begin to blur. He knew she had moved on. He knew there was someone else in her life. And that knowledge, combined with rejection, can trigger something deeper than anger. It can create a sense of being replaced, of losing control over something he believed was still his to hold on to. That's where escalation begins, because sometimes the most dangerous situations don't feel dangerous at first. At this point, what would you have done? Would you have created more distance? Or do you think she believed the situation would eventually settle on its own? And more importantly, do you think she saw the danger coming? Night had settled in quietly over Fleetwood Drive. Inside the house, everything felt still. No raised voices, no tension in the air, just the kind of calm that makes a place feel safe, like nothing could go wrong there. Terrencia was in her bedroom, lying in bed with her boyfriend. It was a private moment, nothing unusual, nothing out of place, just two people spending time together, unaware that outside those walls, something else was already in motion. Somewhere outside, Zverian Brent was approaching. Not by accident. Not randomly. He knew where he was going. Each step brought him closer to a place that once felt familiar, but now represented something else entirely. A place where he no longer belonged, but refused to disconnect from. His mind wasn't quiet. It was filled with everything that had led up to this point. The rejection, the distance, the reality that she had chosen a different path. And now, that path included someone else. Inside the bedroom, the shift was immediate. That quiet sense of comfort was gone, replaced by something harder to explain. Not panic yet, but awareness. The kind that makes you stop mid-thought and listen. Terrencia's attention moved toward the door. Her boyfriend did the same. Neither of them spoke right away. Because when something feels off, words don't come first, instinct does. Outside the room, the movement didn't slow down. It got closer, more deliberate, each step closing the distance between what had been separate and what was about to collide. Then the door. It didn't stay closed. There was no knock. It was violently opened. For a split second, no one moved. No one spoke. Just three people in the same space, caught in a moment that didn't make sense yet. Zverian Brent stood there. Inside a place he was no longer supposed to be, looking directly at the scene in front of him. Terrencia, in bed, with someone else. The silence stretched, not empty, but heavy. Terrencia's body tensed, her mind trying to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. How did he get in? Why was he here? And more importantly, what was he about to do? Her boyfriend reacted differently. His posture shifted, more alert, more defensive. The kind of reaction that comes when a situation suddenly feels unsafe. In that moment, everything changed. The silence didn't last. It broke without warning. Gunfire. Loud, close, immediate. There was no time to react, no time to speak, no time to process what was happening. Shots rang out into the room. Everything that had been still just seconds before turned into chaos. Terrencia didn't have a chance. Her boyfriend's perspective shifted instantly from confusion to survival. There's a difference between seeing danger and being in it. And in that moment, he was in it. He had been shot. The pain, the shock, it all collided at once. But even in that state, instinct took over. This wasn't just about understanding what was happening anymore. It was about getting out of it, about staying alive. Despite being injured, he returned fire. Not out of aggression, but out of necessity. Because when something like this happens, there are no options left. Only reactions, only seconds, only decisions that determine who makes it out and who doesn't. Brent was hit during the exchange, but the damage had already been done. Terrencia Jackson didn't survive. Her life ended right there, in the same place she had been resting just moments earlier. No warning, no way to escape. Just a moment that shifted from normal to devastating in seconds. Her boyfriend survived the attack. But survival in situations like this doesn't mean things go back to normal. It means carrying the memory of that moment, the sound, the images, the realization of how quickly everything changed. In a matter of seconds, everything that had built up, the rejection, the tension, the refusal to let go, turned into something that could never be undone. And the consequences didn't end in that room. Calls came in. Urgent, frantic. Within minutes, law enforcement and emergency responders arrived at the scene. What they found inside the home was the aftermath of something that had unfolded in seconds, but would leave a lasting impact on everyone connected to it. Terrencia Jackson was pronounced dead at the scene. Her boyfriend, injured but alive, was treated for his wounds. His survival meant that there was someone who had witnessed what happened inside that room. Someone who could speak to those final moments. Zverian Brent was also injured from the exchange of gunfire. He didn't get far. Authorities took him into custody shortly after, bringing an immediate end to any further threat that night. What had started as a private situation had now become a criminal case, and the focus shifted quickly from what happened to why it happened and how it would be handled under the law. Brent was charged in connection with Terrencia's death, as well as for the shooting of her boyfriend. The nature of the crime, entering the home, opening fire, and the outcome that followed, made the case clear in its direction. As the case moved forward, the details presented painted a picture of escalation, of a situation that had built over time and reached a breaking point inside that bedroom. In court, the evidence and testimony centered on that night. The forced entry, the confrontation, the gunfire, and the consequences that followed. The legal process took its course, and in the end, Zverian Brent was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Terrencia Jackson. He was also convicted of aggravated assault for shooting her boyfriend. The verdict brought a level of legal closure, but closure in a courtroom doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't bring someone back. It doesn't undo the moment that changed everything. For Terrencia's family, the outcome meant justice had been served, but the loss remained. Permanent, unchangeable. For the survivor, it meant continuing life with the memory of that night, of how quickly things turned and how close it came to ending differently. And for everyone who followed the case, it became another reminder of how situations that begin with emotion can end in something far more serious when they cross a line that should never be crossed. That difference may seem small on the surface. People break up every day. People move on. But in certain situations, rejection doesn't settle into acceptance. It turns into something else, something heavier. When a person ties their sense of control, identity, or worth to someone else, rejection can feel like more than loss. It can feel like something that needs to be corrected. And that mindset, when left unchecked, can become dangerous. In this case, the warning signs weren't loud. There was no dramatic moment that clearly said this is about to escalate. Instead, it was subtle. Continued contact after the relationship ended. An inability to step back. A presence that remained even when distance had been created. These are the kinds of behaviors that are often dismissed as emotional reactions. But sometimes, they point to something deeper. Something that isn't resolving on its own. Situational awareness plays a critical role in moments like this. Understanding who still has access to your space. Recognizing when someone isn't respecting boundaries. Taking seriously the possibility that unresolved emotions can turn into action. Because the danger isn't always obvious at first. It builds quietly, and by the time it becomes visible, it can already be too late. This case also highlights something else. How quickly a situation can shift. One moment, everything feels normal. The next, it's irreversible. And that's what makes awareness so important. Not fear, but awareness. The ability to recognize when something isn't right, even if it doesn't yet feel like a threat. Because sometimes, the most dangerous people aren't strangers, they're the ones who refuse to let go. It all goes back to that moment. A proposal. A question that was supposed to lead to a future. Instead, it became the point where two paths separated, one moving forward, the other refusing to accept the direction things had gone. Terrencia chose to move on. She chose a different life. And for a time, it looked like she was getting exactly that, a fresh start, a new relationship, a sense of peace. But that choice didn't exist in isolation, because someone else was still holding on. And when those two realities collided, it didn't end in conversation. It ended in violence. Do you think this could have been prevented? What stood out to you the most about this case? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real, detailed stories like this, stories that go beyond headlines, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because what started as a proposal ended in a moment no one could take back.